The torches flickered like dying stars as the wedding procession crept through the narrow streets of Rome. It was the summer of the year 85 deep in the rule of Emperor Domitian, when the Romans believed June carried the blessings of the gods. For marriage, at the center of it all, walked Flavia Tertia, barely 18, wrapped in a saffron veil that dimmed the world around her. Her hair had been parted and woven into 6 ceremonial braids, tied with white woolen, ancient style, older than the empire itself. Earlier that morning, when her mother helped fasten those woolen bands, Flavia had seen tears fall silently onto her shoulder. She did not understand them then. In roughly 3 hours, she would. By appearances, the day had been beautiful. The wedding rites had unfolded exactly as tradition demanded. A pig had been sacrificed, and the priest declared its entrails favorable. Contracts had been read aloud, ink pressed onto parchment, and Flavia's father had spoken the words that legally transferred her from his authority into her husband's. She had repeated the vow. Countless brides before her had whispered, "Ubi to Gaius ego Gaia, where you are Gaius, I am Gaia." With those words, her identity ceased to belong to her. She became the property socially, legally, spiritually of Gaius Petronius Celestus, a wealthy merchant 23 years older than her, a man she had seen only a handful of times. But the ceremony had only been the gentle surface of something far older and far darker. What waited at the end of this torchlit march, the house she had never stepped into? The bridal chamber. No one had described to her the rituals her mother refused to name. These were the things that made Roman marriage far more than a contract. They were the things no one taught daughters openly. They were the reason her mother's hands had trembled. Around her, the crowd chanted wedding verses, mocking, shockingly explicit. Roman tradition insisted such obscenities protected the bride from evil spirits. Young men shouted suggestions about the night ahead, words that stung even through the veil. Everyone else laughed. Only Flavia stared at the cobblestones beneath her feet, taking slow, measured breaths, counting each step as she drew closer to whatever this night demanded. Her mother's warning echoed in her memory: do not resist. Whatever they require of you, do not resist. Resistance only makes it worse. At last, the procession reached the home of Gaius Petronius Celestus. Large, imposing, decorated with woolen garlands and fresh greenery, it was the house of a man who had grown rich from grain and influence. 2 torches blazed beside the doorway, announcing that this was a house where a marriage would be consummated tonight. The crowd roared. Louder nuts were thrown at her feet, symbols of fertility skittering across the stones, catching in her dress. Her husband stood waiting in the entrance. His smile was polite, even nervous, but it was the anxiousness of a man preparing for a performance. Flavia's fear was of a very different kind. She sensed an event approaching that everyone knew about, except her. Behind him, in the shifting glow of lamplight, she saw shadows far too many for a private moment. Flavia's stomach tightened. A wedding night in Rome was not simply between husband and wife. It required witnesses, supervisors, rituals that needed to be performed and confirmed. Gaius lifted her over the threshold, as custom required. It was meant to protect her from bad luck, but the gesture carried the echo of the distant past. Brides were carried into their husbands' homes, whether they wished it or not. The door closed behind her. The muffled singing outside faded. Inside the atrium, Flavia froze. 7 people waited for her. An elderly woman dressed as a pronuba, the matron appointed to oversee every detail of the consummation. A priest, whose presence made no sense until much later. 3 female slaves with bowls of water and scented oil, their eyes empty and trained not to react. A physician standing beside his bag of instruments, and in the corner, draped with heavy cloth, was something else, something carved from dark wood, nearly 4 feet tall. Its outline was blurred, but even the partial shape made Flavia's throat tighten with dread. The pronuba approached, taking Flavia's hands in her own firmly, almost forcibly. "Welcome to your husband's house," she said. "The rites must begin. Here is the part history books never tell you. You've probably seen romanticized versions of ancient Rome women in flowing stolas, golden sunlight, polite rituals, and harmless traditions. Textbooks describe Roman weddings as charming spectacles with veils, rings, songs, and celebrations. But they never describe what happened after the procession reached the house. Ancient sources write endlessly about Roman life. Yet when it comes to the wedding night, their words suddenly become vague. Euphemisms replace descriptions. Phrases like the customary rites were performed and she was made a wife in the traditional manner appear again and again. Why? Because those customs were brutal, invasive, and rooted in an age far older than the Empire time when women were not wives, but property transferred from one man to another. Later, Christian writers called these rituals abominations, demanding their destruction. Statues were smashed. Texts were burned. Entire traditions were erased from the official record because they revealed a truth Rome preferred to hide. But tonight, you will learn exactly what those missing texts once described. You will learn what stood beneath the cloth in the corner of that atrium. You will learn what Flavian, every Roman bride, was once required to do. You will learn why witnesses were needed, why physicians waited, why no bride ever forgot her wedding night, and you will see why Rome buried its own past. If you're fascinated by these forgotten histories, subscribe right now and tell me where you're watching from. Stay until the very end, because the ritual that happened at dawn, the one pieced together only recently from surviving fragments, is the most disturbing of all. Now, let us return to the beginning, so you can understand what Roman marriage truly was. Not romance, not partnership, but a legal and spiritual transfer of ownership. A woman moving from the hand of her father into the hand of her husband. A transaction wrapped in ceremony, a system so old that even the Romans barely remembered where it began. Marriage in ancient Rome was not a private celebration of love. It was a formal transfer of property, bound by law, ritual, and public verification. Romans treated women as property in this context, and like any valuable asset withered land. Livestock or slaves a bride required inspection, witnesses, and careful documentation. When a farm was sold, the transaction was observed by witnesses, the boundaries measured and blessings invoked to ensure legitimacy. The same principles applied to marriage. A woman's worth lay in her ability to produce legitimate heirs, children, whose paternity could never be questioned, securing the family line and property inheritance. This made verification central. A bride's virginity had to be confirmed, her reproductive capacity documented, and the act that would transfer her from her father's control to her husband's had to be witnessed. Roman law was explicit. Marriage was not complete until consummated. And this consummation had to be observable because, otherwise, how could anyone be certain it had occurred? The procedures were meticulously codified, and while modern sensibilities recoil, in the Roman framework, they made perfect sense. The pronuba, a respected married woman, played a critical role. She guided the bride, instructed her in the rituals, and most importantly witnessed the consummation, giving legal testimony if disputes arose. Ancient sources are deliberately vague, but references in legal texts and writings by Roman authors confirm her essential role. If she had only been present without observing, her testimony would have carried no weight in court. Archaeological evidence supports this. Roman homes contained rooms designed to accommodate observers. And wall paintings from Pompeii show wedding. Scenes that imply intimate acts were performed under watchful eyes. Offerings left by brides at temples also hint at the ordeal they endured. Flavia Tertia, a young Roman bride, experienced this firsthand. She was led through the atrium by the pronuba, past ceremonial basins and slaves, past the physician who would examine her, and finally, before a wooden statue of Mutinus Tutinus, the Roman god of fertility. Unlike amulets or garden statues, this figure was life-sized, anatomically detailed, and central to the ritual. The pronuba instructed Flavia to greet the god, offer herself as tradition demanded, and accept the process before the eyes of witnesses. Christian writers like Augustine and Arnobius describe brides straddling the statue, framing the act as sacred and invoking fertility, while also preparing the bride for submission to her husband. Refusal was possible in theory, but meant social ruin, dishonor, and a broken marriage contract. Flavia complied. Before the wedding, a physician or midwife performed a pre-consummation examination, confirming her virginity and documenting it. Legally, after the rituals and consummation, the post-consummation examination verified that the marriage was complete, that her body had transitioned from virgin to wife, and that the property transfer was legally secure. Every stage guidance by the pronuba ritual with the statue, examination before and after consummation, was observed, recorded, and verified. To Romans, this was neither cruel nor extraordinary. It was simply proper procedure. Over centuries, Christianity reshaped these practices. Women were recognized as full human beings with souls equal to men. Marriage became a sacrament, a holy union reflecting the relationship between Christ and the Church. The public and semi-public rituals, the examinations and the worship of mutinous tutinous were no longer acceptable. Statues were destroyed, texts erased, and the pronuba's witnessing duties became purely ceremonial. Evidence of these practices was deliberately obliterated, leaving only fragments, brief legal mentions, medical treatises, and condemnations. From Christian writers, the silence of Roman women compounds our understanding. Flavia Tertia lived for decades after her wedding, raising children and guiding her own daughter through the same rituals. She never recorded her experience, nor did any other Roman woman of her class. What we know comes entirely from external sources: legal, medical, religious, and archaeological. From these fragments, we understand that marriage was legal, social, and religious, not personal. The bride's body was the medium through which property, family, honor, and lineage were secured. These rituals were not universal, but they were widespread among the middle and upper classes. Among the poor, or among slaves, simpler arrangements sufficed. In the senatorial elite or imperial families, the rituals became even more elaborate. Augustus codified laws reinforcing verification and documentation to prevent disputes and protect dynastic succession. For generations, Roman women lived through wedding nights that were observed, documented, and legally verified. The Christian transformation was sweeping. Marriage shifted from property transaction to sacrament, and all evidence of verification. Rituals was systematically removed. By the medieval period, Romans' wedding customs examined bodies, semi-public consummations, and the worship of mutinous Teutonus were largely forgotten. The mythology of saffron veils and scattered nuts replaced the harsh reality, yet fragments survived, allowing historians to reconstruct the truth. Roman weddings were legal, public, and ritualized acts that treated women as property. Flavia Tertia's story reminds us that civilization can be sophisticated and brutal at once. Roman law and custom coexisted with systematic dehumanization. Generations of women endured these practices silently, passing their knowledge in whispers, tears, and warnings. The rituals were normalized, embedded in culture, and erased only when a new religious and moral framework demanded it. What remains is a fragmentary record of what was endured, forgotten, and hidden, but also a testament to the resilience of those who lived it. For Flavia, her wedding night was just the beginning. She became a wife, a mother, a matron of her household. But she also became part of a silenced legacy, one that historians must piece together from the traces left behind. In doing so, we confront not only the practices themselves, but also the cultural assumptions that made them possible and the erasure that followed. The women of Rome lived, endured, and were silenced, but through history, their story can finally be remembered.